to your point, and we see it a lot in marketing when budgets are set and targets are provided, in that you have the same budget and you have the same resource and you have the same time to deliver a bigger target, to deliver on a bigger target or objective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And with all the best will in the world, it's not magic dust. Where's that gonna come from? I'm not saying money's everything, but it's also the time and the resource, and so my point being, you need to think differently
yeah.
about what we class as a home, as a temporary home, as a solution for homelessness.
I completely agree. And the phrase that comes to mind, Pete, is "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good." That you're absolutely right.
Mhm,
All things being equal, we should, but we would and should be building enough good quality, affordable homes for, and social homes and everything else, where the mix of our housing provision provides ample, secure housing for everybody. The idea of anyone not being able to have somewhere to call home and feel safe and it not be damp and everything else. Like, of course, we should be providing permanent residency in that respect. It's a fascinating article. And
Ryan, happy New Year.
happy New Year! It's yeah, it's been a long year already, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, 14th of Jan. I mean, this is the first episode back this year, so I think we're although we're in the bracket of you shouldn't really say Happy New Year that often now, 14 days in, I think we can get away with this being the first episode of 2026.
Well, listen, it's our podcast and we've done it now. So what are you going to do? Let's let's look at
Edit
it. But
it,
did you?
maybe? That's
Yeah, this is true. I
Nah,
mean, we've never done that before, have we? So let's just let's just keep it
we're
rolling.
seamless.
Exactly that. Exactly. Did you have a good break?
Yeah, yeah, it was really good. As you know, talking in the virtual green room, hired a van for Christmas, as you do, which is always fun. What about yourself?
A pretty quiet one, a manic sort of Christmas day, and then a pretty peaceful period afterwards. So yeah, I was well rested, but it's been a very fast kick off to the year, which I'm hoping's a good sign.
Mm,
We'll get onto it pretty quickly with our first story, but yeah, maybe everything that we were talking about sort of pre-Christmas proves to be true. The sort of foundational year last year, and sort of trudging through some of the difficult, macro factors. But
mm.
yeah, certainly if 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 my experience so far this year is the sort of shared one with others, then we're in for a busy one this year. This sounds like you're in a similar kind of a boat.
Yeah, I think roller coaster, I think's the word,
Mm.
but, in construction, we like nothing more than a few peaks and troughs throughout the year, interspersed with some, like you said, some macro challenges that the industry is forever facing, it feels.
Yeah, and
Uh,
and a lot of news this week. I
mm.
started back on the 2nd of Jan, and well, to anyone listening within the trade press, I think you were all having an extended break because there wasn't an awful lot of an awful lot of news updates
Yeah,
and stuff published. But
yeah,
yeah,
they're
started the scheme last week.
ruining our content, come on.
I know
Didn't they
exactly.
get the memo?
Yeah, delayed start on that, but
Yeah,
certainly making up for lost time. I think obviously we're sticking to our
mhm.
3 headlines format, but we've been a bit cheeky in that there are a couple of threads to pull together on seemingly disparate stories. So yeah, lucky listeners, because we've got a lot to get through this week, haven't we?
Yeah, let's dive into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, I think first thing that we've touched on it there is the economics of it all, and I wanted to start actually by talking a little bit about this idea of kind of sentiment versus reality, and a slight tangent. We'll talk about London a little bit later on,
Mhm.
as we did a couple of times last year in relation to affordable housing and housing starts in urban regen. But I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if you saw Sadiq Khan, or Sir Sadiq Khan as he is now, was out in the press talking about the lowest ever homicide rates in the capital, and this idea of London as this increasingly safe city, and so on, and sort of booking a lot of the to this point on sentiment, a lot of the beliefs held in certain sections about London, London has fallen and all this other nonsense that you get in certain, backwaters of the internet. Um, Khan struggling to cut through with these are the facts, these are the figures, this is the demonstrable measured truth here, doesn't sit quite with where people are in terms of the sentiment that they feel, and this idea of
Mhm.
reality and sentiment clashing up against each other. We went through all of last year Looking at the Standard and Poor UK PMI index, construction was in the red for the entire year, and that's largely sentiment based. That's them going interviewing people making purchasing decisions on, do you expect your order book to grow or decrease or whatever. Um, we've reported on that metric several times, but yeah, that was the whole of last year in decline seemingly. And yet the ONS data shows that we grew. There's a really interesting analysis piece for anyone that's subscribed to Building by someone that we mentioned on the show before, Pablo Christie Vorm of ACOM, sort of getting into the ONS data and the underlying data beneath. And yeah, there was modest growth, but growth nonetheless within construction last year of 1.5% on output, outpacing manufacturing and outpacing services. So yeah, not that everything's rosy in the garden, but if 25 felt like a tough year for people, maybe we're onto a good thing in 26. And maybe you've had a chance to sort of deep dive into that one, Pete.
The one thing that stood out for me on this one, and it was clues in the title, really, is that let's say the title. Strong order books drive tender inflation as smaller
Mm,
firms struggle,
mm,
and I think there's a huge opportunity here for these tier one larger organizations within construction to really support the smaller firms, because if they're not careful, and we're not careful as an industry, then yeah, on the face of it, it looks rosy, but then who the hell's gonna do the rest of the work? Because all these smaller organizations will no longer exist. Um, but that's, glass half empty. Looking at glass half full, yeah, there's some positive signs. There's a lot of charts on the upward trajectory, or it feels like that, which is great for the year. Proceed with caution, I think is the correct
mm.
phrase, but positive caution is
I
probably
think
the
so.
the the one I would use.
Yeah, I think that's a fair. And it's not an accident. The whole we've mentioned it several times. So congratulations, Steve Reed, because the messaging's clearly worked. But we've mentioned this idea of build, baby, build, but all of that being tied to house building. And then the house building
Mhm,
starts. We're down on house building. Um, I think because that gets so much of the attention within mainstream press for obvious reasons. Some of the underlying statistics, so public non-housing up 22.5%, which is a massive, massive leap.
mhm,
A big driver there, sadly, you can't avoid what's happening at the minute, in terms of Ukraine, obviously, Greenland, Venezuela, etc. There is a lot that is causing investment into defence. And again, just as a slight aside, I mentioned several different threads to tie together. There was an article I read in New Civil Engineer last week where there's some concern now for all of the money that has been promised and work that is sat within planning for infrastructure now may get diverted away to support the defence efforts and so on. So there's still construction work there for someone, but that may get channeled into different sort of parts of the industry, which is interesting. But yeah, house building and commercial sort of the big losers across the piece. So overall sector up, but yeah, there are certain parts of that could do with a little bit of attention this year. I think one of the things we'd spoken about it actually, funny enough, within the context of civils and infrastructure. But in general, new orders up 29.3%. So this idea of pent up demand within system and sort of people
mhm,
looking to get things moving. That's the thing that if I'm going to be the opposite of you and sort of be glass half full, that would be the biggie for me, is that
mhm.
there's clearly some good stuff happening. It's over to your point. It's on the sector now to realise it, and that probably can't happen if it's just the tier ones that are looking at things. And it's also going to happen very slowly if prices start to increase for labour, for materials, and so on, because things start to become less viable quite quickly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and we're back to 2025, 2024, and so on and so forth, with price increases and materials being a determining factor for how these things go once the projects are over the line.
Mm.
Which seamlessly leads us into our 1.5 story. And our friends, the building safety regulators, are really helping, I feel, with this drive, and will help massively in 2026, especially if they keep going at the pace they are going, because it doesn't feel like they're slowing down at all.
Not at all. Well, again, to call back to previous, episodes of the show, we focused on,
Mm,
Andy Rowe, who the chair of the building safety regulator, who, it was in front of a parliamentary I can't remember if it was the Lords or Commons now, but there was a parliamentary committee that he was called into to sort of explain what was happening with approvals, particularly around the logjam that was at Gateway 2. If you remember, his big sort of pledge at the time was, "We will have the backlog cleared by the end of the year," and not quite happened, but I mean, give
mhm,
the guy a break. That I think you were alluding to it there. The pace with which things seem to be accelerating now. But for context, one of the figures that I found in there, the numbers that they declared on year end was that they got through 200. This wasn't just Gateway 2, by the way. This was
mm,
all sort of applications through BSR. 200 approvals in Q1, and then more than 700 in quarter four. So if you imagine that as a graph, the pace with which that has sort of accelerated upwards is pretty phenomenal. We've spoken before about the introduction of things like the innovation unit, for instance, that we're taking on some of the more difficult cases and working more closely with people from an account management point of view. That seems to be working massively. And yeah, on Gateway 2, 727 decisions in quarter four. It's
mhm,
impressive stuff. Like I say,
mhm.
we hoisted by his own petard somewhat in this idea of clearing the backlog, but yeah, that notwithstanding, that's yeah, in any other walk of life to see that level of progression quite that quickly is it's an impressive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, over 250% increase from
Mm,
Q1 last year. And it's just fair play, hats off, like you said you were going to do something and you've done it. Yeah, and that's it could be the very least you expect for people in power. But having said that, how many times could we have come on here and looked at something that was a pledge, a proposal, or something needed to happen, and it just hasn't happened, or it's been slow to do that?
mm.
They said they'd do something. Yeah, they haven't hit the target, but you, anybody could see that you're not going to hit that target 100%. You're just not. But like I've got nothing to negative to say about this, which is part of our mantra, really. um, a lot of activity in London. Again, it's going to be a given that that's
Mhm.
one of the driving factors. But yeah, you mentioned some of the numbers there, and I'm not going to go over them again. But it is impressive, and there's nothing stopping them continuing at this pace with the because I remember speaking last when we covered this last year, and it was starting to snowball, and we were talking about how our old friend again, AI, comes into it, and not just AI, but certain technology helping with this and the way it will help in the future. And I can't see any way that they are doing this without changing the processes and without changing how they were doing things, which is great to see, and it's what you want from people that can
Yeah.
make those changes.
Yeah, and yeah, well, I haven't obviously given the nature of the role that I do, I haven't submitted an application for this myself. But I think whether it's AI, whether it's the innovation unit, a combination thereof, it sounds like there is
Mhm,
some sort of standardization within application, or unless a building is completely has unique parameters or whatever else the case may be that would change that. But we're looking at 12 to 13 weeks from submission to approval now within that innovation unit. So something is happening there. They within the stats, I noticed they were at pains to stress good applications without going into massive
mhm.
detail as to what good looks like. But yeah, I think, and I think that's a really pertinent point that they're doing their bit, the industry has to do its bit as well in terms of preparing the data in the correct way and submitting applications that are able to be, judged on the basis of their merit rather than incomplete data and incomplete information, inaccuracies and so on. That, yeah, if we want things to move at pace, and again, per the first part of this story, I guess the vested interest there is that if things are on the increase cost wise, you would want your scheme approved faster so that you can get on with building faster and get your costs and labour locked in faster. Yeah, that's in everybody's interest. So everyone involved in that has a part to play. But it's all, I can just, without getting into the statistics too much and boring people to death with just a
Mhm.
long list of numbers of applications increasing, pace increasing, approvals percentage increasing. It's all positive. And again, like pledges and delivery and so on. But this idea of this hockey stick that the first couple of years of
Mhm.
this government in power has been about new legislation, sort of fixing the problems that existed and sort of working with industry to move things along. And you will see the benefits of that towards the back end of this parliament, and things will tick up pretty quickly. If this is a model, you'd have to say that maybe there's some credence to that, as ambitious as it sounds and as fanciful as it perhaps sounds to some people. Um, there is a decent sort of case study here for what is possible in that respect, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely, and the CEO of the building safety regulators, and I'm only mentioning him because he's got the best surname in the world, Charlie Pugsley. Fantastic. He kind of puts it really eloquently. So he says, "We continue to remain cautiously optimistic as
Mhm.
we know the pace of improvements must continue into 2026 and beyond. We all remain fully committed to supporting the pace of essential construction while upholding the critical safety standards."
Yeah.
And that, goes without saying, doesn't it?
Well, but I think it's worth mentioning, to be honest, Pete. I think we spoke about it before that we
Mhm.
all want more things. Well, the country, as we'll come on to in our next story, needs things to be built and to be built at pace. But that shouldn't be, where we sacrifice health and safety in order to do so, or environmental impact in order to do so. That we need to find ways of working within the system that enable us to do all of those things without any major sacrifice. And yeah, this feels like a really positive step in the right direction. So and again, even more positively, it sounds like they're not resting on their laurels either. So while there's clearly improvements being made, that they believe there's more to come. So yeah, good
Yeah.
on them. And yeah, for all of that, there is a lot of negativity and shouting within trade media and so on. Really good to see some positive news highlighted and pats on the back given where due. So yeah, fair
Yeah,
play.
absolutely. Cool. Excellent. Right, headline number 2 headline of 2026. Yeah, this one's a a good one to chat about, and that's the reason we picked it. But this is, developing homes at scale and speed, to solve homelessness,
Well, I was going to
which
say, but positive
go
story, but born out of something that is some of the headline stats in here. I felt a bit slightly ashamed for being ignorant of, but yeah, 1 in every 23 children in London homeless.
Mhm.
It's and that doesn't mean rough sleep, and that just means without permanent accommodation, of course. But a horrendous stat. We've spoken about it before in the context of this pursuit of 1.5 million homes, and that it's not industry growth for industry growth's sake, or chasing sort of economic headlines for the sake of them. That we've said several times that there are real people and real stories that sit behind these, but that in particular, yeah, it really it shocked me. I don't know, it's having school age children and looking at the size of their
Mhm.
classes and being able to put it into context personally that way. But yeah, what a damning statistic, and something that we should be striving to do something about.
Yeah, and you for those that are more privileged than others, you just don't necessarily think
Mm,
about it or indeed see it, and even more so if you're not in a dramatically urban area. I think in more rural areas, it's probably less noticeable as well. But don't get me wrong, I haven't got a definition of homelessness, but I think it's it's not just your atypical, you see somebody on a street that
yeah.
looks like they're homeless. It goes a lot deeper than
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And the news story cites temporary accommodation, B&Bs, hotels, and the council are providing for these families, and it's something like 4,000,000, 5.5 million, I think I read, a day on
A
things
day.
like this, and
Yeah.
and and surely for 5.5 million a day, we can build something that is better than jumping from B&B to B&B, for particularly for families with children,
Well,
and that
quite. Sorry, go on, Pete.
and then the modular homes part and how quickly we can
Mm,
build that links back to, and the story does it nicely, it links back to during COVID and how fast we could build things and create things en masse for the good of the nation, if you like.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we couldn't do it here.
No, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna jump into to say exactly that, to give credit where
Yeah.
it's due. This, the reason this is on our radar was, a piece in Architects Journal from, Russell Curtis of RCKA, talking about exactly that. Obviously, there is the human element of this which got me, and to your point, SLG, we've been fortunate to work with the charity Crash a couple of years back, which is the sector's charity for homelessness. And I know Architects Journal are doing some great stuff with shelter at the minute as well on this idea
Mhm.
of accommodation. And a lot of that was exactly as you say, that so much of homelessness is invisible. This idea of hidden homelessness, and just insecure accommodation that might be staying with loved ones, or this point, it's B&Bs a lot of the time. So that 5.5 million figure that you referenced there is the amount that London councils combined are spending per day on temporary accommodation. So that's north of 3 billion a year, and it's more than is being spent on providing affordable accommodation, as we've discussed previously. Again, the article from Mr. Curtis cites London in total only built 2,158 homes in the first half of
Mhm.
last year. Um, and that 5% of that was, it was 5% of the actual target for the capital, which is 5% it's insane, isn't it? And then in quarter one of last year, only 347 affordable homes. It's just not, it's not sustainable. But as to turn this positive, as you point out, the Nightingale Hospital's a great example of an acute crisis that needs a solution, and therefore here's one offered that may not be the norm and may not be the standard. And then obviously he is then offering modular homes as the potential sort of bit of lateral thinking involved, but a
Mhm.
potential solution to this problem. He cites several modular manufacturers that have done things, very, very quickly. It mentions lots of land in the capital that currently is used for car parking, or is derelict. These sort of former industrial sites and brownfield sites and so on, that could be found and could be used very, very quickly. And yes, there is going to be some upfront investment, but in the context of 3 billion a year, it's yeah, and not forgetting the human factor of all of this. I don't know what you think, but surely it's got to be worth exploring, hasn't it?
Yeah, you said it correctly there when you were talking about different ways of thinking about housing solutions. So in this article, they mention an organization called Z Pods,
Mm.
which are focused on zero carbon homes, and they've done that in developing 25 above a Bromley car park. And then in Cardiff, you've got Waits and RSHP developing permanent homes, timber-based, carbon positive offsite construction systems. It's doable, and to your point, and we see it a lot in marketing when budgets are set and targets are provided, in that you have the same budget and you have the same resource and you have the same time to deliver a bigger target, to deliver on a bigger target or objective,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and with all the best will in the world, it's not magic dust. Where's that gonna come from?
yeah,
I'm not saying money's everything, but it's also the time and the resource, and so my point being, you need to think differently
yeah.
about what we class as a home, as a temporary home, as a solution for homelessness. It isn't just a 2 up, 2 down brick built home. It just isn't. And there's quicker ways of developing these homes, as these organizations have done. They've actually done it, that you can see it. And there's not a quick fix, but there's a speedier fix
Mm.
for these things that is tried and tested and innovative, and can only get better the more we try these new things.
I completely agree. And the phrase that comes to mind, Pete, is "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good." That you're absolutely right.
Mhm,
All things being equal, we would and should be building enough good quality, affordable homes for, and social homes and everything else, where the mix of our housing provision provides ample, secure housing for everybody. The idea of anyone not being able to have somewhere to call home and feel safe, and it not be damp and everything else. Like, of course, we should be providing permanent residency in that respect. But if that isn't feasible for whatever reason, this isn't to get into policy stuff, or anything budgetary and so on, then yeah, but what are the alternatives? And
mhm.
can we do both? Is one a stopgap that allows us to get to the sort of better permanent solution over time? I don't know, but it's a fascinating article, and I would say that, and again, I would, for balance, we haven't covered a lot of the architectural press, I don't think, over the last couple of months. So
Mm,
nice to redress that a little bit, and just a really really thought provoking piece, as you say. If you start to sort of reframe home, because it's that typical
yeah,
British
yeah.
thing, as you say, of brick built, and it has to look like this, and so on. That there is an alternative that seems to have some real demonstrable success of solving this particular problem. And I think that's the jumping off point, is what is the problem to be solved, rather than automatically agreeing on what the fix looks like. But yeah, I'd encourage everyone with an interest in this to go and have a read, and let us know what you think. I'm genuinely
Yeah.
fascinated to see if other people sort of absorb this the way that you and I have. But yeah, it's a fascinating read for certain.
And if you start to join the dots, I'm going somewhere with this, by the way, so bear with. If you start to join the dots, we talk about innovative approaches because if you stick to what you've done before, you'll get what you had before, and we need a different approach. And then you put into that in the mix, as we covered earlier in the first story, price increases of materials or traditional materials, if you like, of which is one way to build a home. Then it's starting to not be clear, but there's a nice little funnel going down into this whole, it needs to be innovative. We need to think of different ways of building houses, different styles of houses, whatever that, like you said, traditional home looks like. It can't be that. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to be stunning and amazing, because some of
Yeah.
the photos you can see, even in this article, show how good these innovative, let's call them, homes or
Mm.
modular built homes can be. But the kicker is we still need material and we still need people in the industry to build them, which kind of leads us on to our final story, um, which is a bit of a double barrel, really, and the headline, it's going to try and grab your interest, isn't it? But research from investors in people has shown that 21% of people employed in the built environment have considered leaving because of the fast pace of change. So are we shooting ourselves in the foot here by trying to change too much too soon?
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Mm,
Much like you, I kind of, the headline jumped out at me. I thought, not least, we talk about skills gap and resource an awful lot, on not just on this podcast, but in general terms. So the headline jumped out as quite alarming, and then you look at the underlying stats. So yeah, 21% considered leaving due to the pace of change. 38% of respondents to this Investors in People survey found the pace of change exhausting. 23% felt that change makes their job harder, and 21% worried about a loss of control. 90% worried about poor and confusing communication. It's yeah, I'd love to sort of get stuck in more to, well, obviously we're not going to speak to individual respondents, are we? But yeah, there's a slight, I have two thoughts that kind of conflict in my mind at the same time. I think one is that people are just scared of change.
mhm,
But at a human level, we just are. Um, Maybe we're not managing the story well enough on I think it's necessary, going back to
mhm,
the gateway 2 stuff, and the previous story on a new approach potentially to housing and to temporary accommodation and permanent accommodation and so on. That I don't think we're going to solve the industry's ails by just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I appreciate it sounds slightly heartless. That might be alienating and might be, confusing and upsetting for some people. Well, take it away from construction now, but you and I will have seen it in marketing. Lots of talk about AI coming for jobs in certain roles, and that being distressing for people.
mm,
And I think it's probably true in a lot of cases. But yeah, we need to get better at managing the narrative around what change might reasonably come, why that might be needed, what the outcomes of that are likely to be positively and negatively, and allow people to weigh those up.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know what you make of those stats, but yeah, I feel really, really conflicted about that once you get into the detail of it.
It's tricky because, like you said, y you want more. Now you've seen these numbers, you want the qualitative behind it, and
Mm,
to actually see the rationale behind why people are feeling like this, because it very much feels that of the people that responded to this, most of them feel the same.
Mm.
Just going off a slight tangent, and it's mentioned in the article that the Royal Town Planning Institute released a survey in November last year, surveyed 2,500 planners, and nearly 7 out of 10 said they don't have the capacity in their team to meet demand. Uh, yeah,
Oh, no, sorry, I was just about to jump in there, and this is
yeah, yeah.
kind of my point. So I don't want to seem dismissive or cold or heartless to anyone, because there may be people listening to this that feel insecure about the future of the sector or their role and don't fully understand what's coming through. I know we mention every episode, there's not one goes by we don't mention AI to some degree. So I would hope anyone listening to this is kind of broadly on board with where we think it's going. But yeah, if that's the case, there is clearly a logjam coming there on planning, which is going to have an impact on the rest of the supply chain. It's okay us talking about a 24% uplift in new plans submitted and output and so on, but that only holds up if we've got people in all of the roles that we need them to have. So how do you how do you cover that gap without innovation? If we can't just throw people at the problem, then there has to be some sort of alternative solution, because I don't like what the other possibilities are if we don't sort of close that gap sooner. So yeah, like I say, I sound really heartless, don't I? That well, to flip these things on their heads, if 23% found that change makes their job harder, then the alternative figure there is that there are 77% that don't feel that's the case.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, you want to bring everyone along for the journey, and I think to tie it back to our day jobs, maybe that's a comms piece for the sector to sort of lay out a little bit. We've spoken before about the Skills England white paper and various other bits on how AI may be implemented across the supply chain, but maybe that's not cutting through. Maybe it's just nerds like you and I that keep an eye out for these things. And collectively, we as a sector and the people that are a bit more bought in perhaps to where we think change is going to come from. Yeah, maybe we need
Mhm.
to do a slightly better job of disseminating some of that stuff to the wider supply chain.
Yeah, it's communication, isn't it? And involving people in these things, because humans are resistant to change as it is, and if you're if you start to fear for your role or your livelihood and your income, then you
Mm,
start to get into a dark place, which means negativity is going to breed more negativity, which isn't a good thing. So I very much feel it is communication, and like we said in the previous story when we're talking about a new way of doing things, it is looking at those new ways of learning and communicating and teaching people,
yeah,
because we're not using rulers, we're not using more traditional methods as much as we did, because they're traditional methods and we've moved on from those methods,
yeah,
although it's always good to keep those skills, always needed good foundation and backbone, but we need to keep up with a pace of change that's happening in other industries, without a doubt.
yeah. Yeah, for certain. And what we've spoken about before, haven't we, in the context of the increase in demand from a college point of view and further education point of view, there's a pipeline there that exists, and hopefully this younger generation are more open, more malleable. Sort of again, if we can communicate with them that this is how the job is done now, but here's what's coming, and they're adequately trained or at least open to embracing that, then yeah, maybe that goes some way towards solving this. But I think if we're onto it, that'd probably be my takeaway for this week. I think we've got a really exciting year ahead. But I think all of us are going to have to be adaptable. I think there's going to be so much demand, and again, if macro conditions improve, then yeah, we're all going to have to think about what problems we're trying to solve, and do we need to sort of adapt a little bit and be a bit more open to change in order to deliver that. So, yeah, some exciting things ahead, but there's maybe some change that we need to consider embracing as well.
Yeah, mine's very much aligned with that in that it, it's embracing the change, but I think 2026 is going to be we've had a few years of, and I'm gonna stick with AI on this one, but we've had, as I'm talking about a more of a sector in terms of
Yeah,
AI than just the actual program itself. We've had a few years of AI. It's going to take jobs. It does this, it does that. It's not as good as you think it is. It's false positives. It tells you lies. Ups and downs and peaks and troughs. But I think 2026 is going to be the year where we start to really solidify what it can do, what it can't do, and instead of having this fantasy it's going to take all our jobs and ruin humanity, I think we're going to, weirdly enough, slow it down to speed it up. So we'll slow
Mhm.
it down and realize there's certain models and certain AI tech that do certain things really well, and that will really help, particularly within construction, because we'll have that focus. And then the likes of ChatGPT and others will have they'll have their place. They'll continue to do their thing as bigger models and pieces of software. But I think within construction, we're going to have these niche AI platforms which really
Mhm.
help certain parts of the sector. So embrace that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Whatever happens, it'll be exciting.
Yes, and we'll be here to guide you through it.
What a place to end.